Is money important? Some of you might now think, well, is that the right question to ask just after Christmas? And well, it certainly is, for a specific reason and for a scientific reason. Of course, you will now say, well, money doesn't buy happiness, and we all know the idiom. And most of us will agree that money is not the only aspect in life. However, if I would say we lower your income significantly, do you think you would be less happy? And most likely, you will agree with me that you would be. So the question now is, how important is money? Which importance does money have? And how do we deal with the topic of money in a corporate or in an organizational context? Because we all know this topic has been very present during the last years, and it has been especially present during the last month and this year, not only due to inflation and the cost of living crisis, but also due to the fact that we have new generations with different needs. And suddenly there's a new study, a new scientific proof about the importance of money, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Because you most likely, when I only mentioned the word money and you are a bit trained and had some seminars on it, you most likely know one study. You said that, well, you will probably say, well, there was this one study which said money makes you happier, but it ends certainly roughly the $75,000 mark. And yes, yeah, that study existed. It was from 2018. However, when this is the case, why do so many people complain about money or about too low payment in the recent past, especially during this year? Why does the topic of inflation still hover above anyone in the organization like a cloud that is still ready to give you a thunderstorm but hasn't done so yet? And when I see and talk about money, and I still see on social media amongst countless employees who got backpacks, T-shirts, or shirts with company logo on it as their Christmas bonus. Like, seriously? That is what you give your employees in a year with a cost of living crisis? I'm a self-employed entrepreneur, so I'm most likely always on the side of organization as long as I can. However, I'm not going to deny science, facts, and evidence for that. When you think that an appropriate bonus is that you give people a shirt with your logo, and I'm sorry, your leaders really need some serious realignment of their values and their perception of reality. We have the Great Resignation, or we had it during this year, and we had quiet quitting where people did not really leave. So the Great Resignation was when people left their jobs. Quiet quitting is they do not leave their jobs, but they do the bare minimum. Basically only what you agreed on in the papers in the working contract. And of course, we have a lack of talent, scarcity of talent, where we are all fighting to get the right talent on board. How do we deal with this topic? Well, most likely you do not plan to have anything with money on the agenda. You hope that you're able to deliver something else. The question now is, what happened? And I tell you what happened. And now we have to look into how to do it better. How to do it better means we look into a new scientific study, because often people say, you can't talk about money here, or we don't want to talk about money here. And let's be upfront here. This is straightforward illegal. It is not allowed, and it's not even even when we don't stick to laws, even if you don't want to stick to laws, it is immoral, it is unethical, it doesn't even follow common sense. Let's just assume you are sitting there on your first job and they tell you this is your pay. By the way, you are not allowed to discuss pay at work. What would your reaction be? Would your reaction be either that you say, oh, I'm not able to discuss work, that probably happens because they're all so rich here that they don't want to talk about it? Or might your reaction be the other option that you say, maybe I can't talk about pay here because something really dodgy is going on and they don't want to ask me about it, while someone else with less experience gets paid more than I do? Well, most likely it is option number 2. So you prefer not to talk about the topic. Let's be straightforward. When you tell people not to talk about payment, it's immoral, it's unethical, and besides that, it is illegal in countless countries. Freedom of speech means freedom of speech when it comes to talking about salaries. In a 2022 study, Matthew Killingsworth did the study that we did in 2018 again. So, of course, some of you might now think, why do we repeat studies? Very simple, because we have new generation entering the workforce, we have changing circumstances, and attitudes as well as developments in society will always change, which is why we repeat studies. I give you a very simple example. If you would ask the question, what do you think about women's rights to vote? Either today or 100 years ago, you will get very different results. And of course, today, no reasonable person would say women should not vote. That is complete nonsense. Of course, equal rights for anyone right now, and we're fighting for this for decades to come. This is why I repeat studies. So, in this year, 2022, Matthew Killingsworth from the National Academy of Sciences repeated that study about money. And he even measured two aspects, not only happiness, he distinguished between well-being, so how you feel, how your health is, etc., and life satisfaction, so how happy are you in life. And just to give you an insight into the data, more than 1.7 million reports have been filed. More than 30,000 employed people were questioned on the matter. So it is representative. And here are the news. Happiness, because you still hope that I know that, because some of you will now hope, well, hopefully he says that the happiness curve flattens around the 80,000 instead of the 70,000 pound mark. No, it is way more than double. You have to even look a bit, where does it flatten? However, when you go way above the 150,000 a year, you see the curve flattening a bit. Still, it's rising, just less, but it's still rising. So you see, and by the way, if it's 150,000 or 180,000 or 130,000, doesn't really matter. Let's face it, most of your employees will not get paid that amount. So as we already agreed, it is completely unacceptable to tell someone not to talk about salary. So what's not helpful as well is when you say, sorry, we just can't pay it more. Or you tell people, sorry, our business model isn't that profitable. We can't pay you more. We don't have more money. Here are the news. These people are not shareholders of your company. These people do not have to deal with your inability to generate profit. If they want, and of course you now can say, hey, if they don't like it, they can leave. However, often when I talk to entrepreneurs and employees leave, you don't show the reaction which aligns with what you said before. When you say, if you don't like it, leave, and someone leaves, you have to be indifferent because you obviously didn't care. You cannot throw slurs at them or tell them they are ungrateful or whatever else people are making up. And I'm a self-employed entrepreneur, so I'm on your side on the game. But of course, common sense and science are not going to be debated here because we need to follow both of them. So when you say, sorry, not possible to pay anymore, that's your problem, not theirs. Because if you want to have people who think like an entrepreneur, which I often read in job ads, they require entrepreneurial thinking. Well, if you want to have entrepreneurial thinking, you must pay for entrepreneurial thinking, which means you have to pay way more than the others and way more than the average and way more than anyone close to you regionally or in the same industry, because you want to have the top-notch cutting-edge people. However, many of you do not want to pay that amount, and that means maybe you need to lower your standards or your expectations. By the way, when you talk about inflation, and of course anyone has a right to get their income aligned with inflation. When you tell people, sorry, everything getting more expensive for us as well, once more, don't make your problem their problem. When there is a real problem with the organization and you dealt with your employees very gratefully and you have a great atmosphere, you created a great organizational culture, people will see that and will not ask for more money because they see it's sensible to now just hope that this is going to be better in the future and do everything within their power to reach that status of things getting better as soon as possible. However, when you didn't care about all of that because you always said, I'm not going to spend money on this, and now you say everything's getting more expensive for me as well, yeah, well, people will leave because they know they get a higher salary somewhere else, because changing companies often pays off more than staying in one, which, by the way, leads to exactly the next problem. Often the budget for retaining employees is way lower than the budget for recruiting new employees. And that means you tell people, sorry, no more money is acceptable. We can't pay you more. Then they tell you, hey, I leave. This is the offer I received. And suddenly you say, oh, we're going to match that offer. Sometimes I wonder if people hear themselves talking. Of course, you lose any kind of credibility with that. And by the way, when you then come up with lines like, this is the game, you know how to play it. Well, if you want to play games with your employees, don't be surprised that you lose out, because hear the news, there are more employees than leaders in the room. So you are going to lose out sooner or later. It is just a matter of time. Leaders must be able to talk about salary. if you're now shocked by that statement, you have a bit of homework to do after this podcast. What you need are so-called income bands. Income bands, or you can also say, some call it revenue bands. However, I see revenue as something different. You can say it's either salary band or income band or whatever you use. I just give you the definition. You have a position, and the position has a certain band connected to it. And the band always says you can earn on this position from to. And now, of course, some people might say, well, how do I define from to? And here's a recommendation. You have a 5-step scale. And the third, number 3, means they meet all the expectations and they can work independently. So that's number 3. So, of course, now the question is, what is 4 and 5? What is 1 and 2? 1 means they are very new to that business, very new to that job, very new to that position, and they need help nearly every day to get everything done. Number 2 means they are able to work independently to a limited amount, but they still need support. Others need to check what they do, but way less than before, but they are on an excellent way. Number 3 means they meet the expectations and they work independently. Number 4 means they exceed the expectations. Either they have other skills or other knowledge. They already gotten into other areas of the business, or they introduce themselves to other parties, to other departments. They know more than you expect them to do, and maybe they are even able to help others a bit, which is not their job, but they still do. Number 5 would be they exceed all the expectations. They have expertise on such a high level that they can not only help others, but they can train new people who come into the business. That is the highest level. That's number 5. And of course, you might now say, well, but there's another problem. I have position A and B. And when someone is on position A and is number 5, so very good, that person makes more, although number 2, the position B, is hierarchically higher, but the number 1 on a very low level is paid less. And yes, that can happen. Tax bands can overlap to a certain extent, and that's not even unusual. I give an example from my close circle of friends. One of my friends worked for a car dealer, a very well-known German car brand. And he was an excellent salesperson. And there they decided to offer him the role of a sales manager leading a whole location, which means you have to recruit your people, have to grow the team, have to grow the revenue, etc., etc., etc. So when he moved from being a salesperson to the sales leader, had a bit less income than he had before. However, of course, as he was successful on the position, he earned way more a year or 2 after. So it might be the case that bands overlap to a certain extent. Very important is you have to justify why this is the case. And in this case, it was easy. They say you have 0 leadership experience, you have 0 leadership training. We have to fully train on everything. And that's why we can pay you less, because only when you put the leadership skills in, then you will make your sales team so successful that they will say, yes, I love to work here and I bring in more money than I did before. And that's your job. And he understood that, and he was very successful, and everyone was happy with that amount of payment. What you need to see is when you do not pay enough, you risk that your organization is going upside down. And by the way, if you still think that it's appropriate to say, and I heard it again and again, that people say, well, don't take yourself too important because everyone can be replaced. Everyone's expendable. Yes, of course. I mean, of course, with a certain amount of time, everyone is expendable and can be replaced. However, you have to see that recruiting someone else on that position costs you between 80 to 120% of that person's annual salary. I know which reaction comes up now. Many people will say, oh, I can't imagine that. It's not imagination. It's not a belief system. So I give you an insight. Often people only check for job ads and what do job ads cost, and that is not enough. So you have to pay, of course, for writing the job ad, for getting the right text in there, and getting the right target audience. You need an agency to put it on if you want to do it properly. If you do it by yourself, you're going to fail anyway. So you put the job ad now up with the agency, all of that you have to pay. Then you have to deal with all the applications. You have to answer every single one of them, because if you don't do, people have the right, and they will do so. They go on Kununu in Germany, for example, or Glassdoor.com in many other countries, and tell, I applied here, no one answers. What an arrogant bunch they are. So you have to deal with every single application. Then you have to review all the applications. Then you have 1, 2, 3 rounds of interviews where other people are involved, etc., etc. Then the contract negotiation at the end, the signature of the contract, the begin of work, and then the whole phase of training the person up to the point that they're able to work independently, which depending on the which depending on the industry you are, may easily take between 3 to 16 months, 18 months. And everyone helping the people becoming the person that is able to work independently, these hours have to count in as well. So between 80 to 100% of a person's salary is a rather conservative approach to what it costs when you lose someone. Be sure that as soon as you lose someone, you have a process in place that deals with it. How to ensure that this does not happen? Of course, there are organizational culture. Of course, there's motivation. Of course, there are great colleagues and this and that. All of that is important. You can look into the motivational pyramid of Maslow or into the Herzberg model of hygiene and motivation. I agree. There are many models, there are many approaches, and all of them are correct. But one aspect is payment, money, cash, dough, not Bitcoin. Maybe Bitcoin in certain companies. I don't know if you do that. However, people are now seeing that the amount of payment goes in a direction that they consider inappropriately low, which kills their motivation, if you like it or not. The peace in your organization, organizational peace, there's a German word which is called Betriebsfrieden, very hard to translate, but it means organizational peace when you do a literal translation. It means everything is going smoothly, people show up to work, everyone likes it, you just do everything that it works out, and everyone's happy. And payment is one part of that, especially when you look at the cost of living, especially when you look at the amount of taxation, especially when you look at the amount of social deduction and whatever else you have, you see that people need payment. And you need these income bands or salary bands, however you like to call them, because with these income bands, leaders must be able to talk about salary and decide on the spot. I give you an example how it should not be. A person who works for you approaches the office and says, I need more money. And then you say, well, can we have an appointment? So you already just push it back 1 week. That's bad already. So next week you talk, and of course, more money. And you say, well, so first you negotiate with that, takes forever. Then you say, I have to hand it to HR. It goes to HR. HR tells you has to go to the board, gets handed to the board. Then HR and the board talk back and forth. Then HR talks to you again, back and forth. Then you present the result, which probably, I've seen companies which need 3 months to get back to you. And then some of them said the result of these 3 months is you don't get a single penny. And of course, people most likely will leave after that. Or, which is in some ways even worse, someone who's making a couple of thousand a year and is there for 5 years with no salary raise. And you then hear back, well, we decided that normally we would not give you anything because crisis, blah, blah, blah. But we decided to give you $100 more per month. Yeah, thanks. Net income, that's like $50. So 50 quid, as we would say in the UK. When you think that this makes the cut, you really lost the plot a long time ago. And don't tell people that they are entitlement thinkers or they are arrogant, or back in the days when you had your training, you got 10 shilling or 5 shells from the beach or whatever. These stories are not relevant anymore in today's times. Payment is part of the deal. Either you pay well, or if you don't pay them well directly, you pay with your employer's brand, which makes recruiting even more harder, and also you have to pay to get your employer's brand back. So paying well in the first place is always the best idea, and the best idea of all of them is when you have leaders in place who are able to decide, because you have these salary or income bands ready, so people are able to talk about salary. Because just to wrap this up, income, payment, money is one part of what ensures for the future your organizational peace. And of course, there's more. Now, some people might think, well, that's a very complex topic. Can we talk about this, Niels? And yes, we can. There are 3 steps which I would like you to follow, because some people already sent me emails on Friday and say, how's the podcasting? I'm not going to go through a ranking. You can see that on social media. We did very well again, ended in the top 10 in Switzerland. And the podcast now is 6-7 countries, constantly somewhere in the top 250. So it's doing very well. So 3 steps I'd like you to do. So first, if you have any additional aspects you'd like to talk about, just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. And then we just have a chat, either via email or Zoom, or we meet, whatever you like. It doesn't cost you a penny. So let's just talk. Thank you very much for the last weeks. Thank you very much for all the Christmas wishes as well. Very much appreciated. By the way, if you have something very specific, so if you're looking for, I don't know, training, speaking or coaching, consulting, mentoring, project interim management, or you need someone who speaks at your event or host it, happy to do that, but I'm happy to just talk about your questions or aspects as well. nb@nb-networks.com. Then here's now big news number 2. Some people ask me if I would be willing to do a live Q&A so people can tune in and simply ask their questions about leadership topics, remote leadership or payment or salary or whatever else. And yes, we will have that from next year. However, it will only be available if you are registered with the expert letter. expert.nb-networks.com. That is the leadership letter that you receive every Wednesday morning. You get free access to everything I published, and you get the invites for the live Q&A, everything at no charge. And of course, important, it's 100% content. There is no advertising in that leadership letter. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. We will have live Q&As from next year, leadership.nb-networks.com. And step number 3, and the most important step now, is apply what you heard in this podcast, because you will only see the positive change in your organization when you know what to put in place where. So the change in your organization will only happen when you take action from here. I'm always happy to help you with putting these changes in your organization. Feel free to drop me a line or contact me on any way possible. And of course, now some people will expect me to say something about the new year. I'm not going to give you the motivational, inspirational speech, because we don't need that. I hope you had a very Merry Christmas. I wish you an amazing last week of the year. I'm going to talk to you again in the new year. I wish you a happy new year. And again, for this last week of the year, and for the last time this year, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.